Alright, so the next couple videos, the next two videos are going to be shorter than the last segment just because we're learning a couple new things just so you can work with reliability and validity. Subtypes for reliability and validity, we're going to work with three or four here. One type of validity is internal validity. Internal validity is how accurately are we measuring what we intended to measure. So for example, let's say that you want to measure smiles. How do you operationalize, sorry, let's say you want to measure happiness and you operationalize happiness to be number of smiles per day. So if a person smiles 20 times, that means that they're very happy, and if a person smiles only 2 times, that means they haven't really been happy that day. So can you think, does that seem like a very internally valid way to measure happiness? So there's a couple things that we could talk about here. Let's say that you don't always notice when you smile. And so if you're just trying to write down every time that you smile, you might have some measurement error because you might miss some. You could have some problems because it can be sometimes difficult to identify what is a smile. Is it okay just to move your lips? Do you have to show some teeth? Do you have to open your mouth when you smile? Does it count if you're talking? Does it have to be a genuine smile? Uh, maybe this isn't going to work for everybody. Do different people's smiles look the same? If you're looking at a dog, when dogs kind of open their lips and they show their teeth, are they smiling? Are they showing happiness? So, internal validity is going to be all about, are we measuring what we meant to measure? Sometimes there's problems there because of measurement error. Sometimes there's problems there because of you not have a very good operationalization. Sometimes there's problems because what we think something is all about is actually different than what it actually is all about. Turns out that maybe you can be happy without smiling. And so smiling is not a very internally valid way to assess or to measure happiness. And so you might want to check out a different way to measure happiness to make your measurements more valid. Okay, another type of validity we're going to skip over here to the right is external validity. External validity is all about how well your ideas work in the real world. And so in an externally valid study, whatever way you measure something is going to make sense in the real world. Say, for example, that you're getting those. You, let me think of something. Well, I mean, let's say that you take some children from an elementary school and you bring them into your laboratory and you give them this toy or that toy, and then you see whether it makes them smarter on a test. So uh, whether or not it makes them smarter on the test is all well and good, but to be externally valid, this toy that's supposed to teach them something or make them smarter needs to make children smarter in the real world. And so external validity is, does this make sense in the real world outside of your research laboratory? When we talk about translational research or applied research, a lot of the times those research types are going to be about checking out, is our basic research externally valid? Because, figuring something out in a laboratory is great, but how useful is it in the real world? That's what we're trying to find out. Okay, this middle one here, test, retest reliability. It's pretty simple because reliability is a pretty simple, consistent topic. So if reliability is how consistent your results are, test, retest reliability is just saying, does the same test give you the same results? For example, like I was saying earlier, if you take those Hogwarts personality tests, do you get the same results? If you take a personality test today and wait a couple of months and then take the same personality test again, does it give you the same results? That's going to be test retest reliability. Let's say you take the SAT or the ACT to try and get into college. Did that test give you the same results the first time you took it and the second time you took it? Let's take a look at another couple examples on these subtypes. So for construct validity, are we measuring what we meant to measure? You could think about when you took your driving test. Do driving tests do a good job of measuring how good of a driver you are? Sometimes it really doesn't feel that way. When I took my driving test, I had been driving for months and I was confident in my driving. But I failed the test the first time because when I stopped at a stop sign, I didn't stop all the way. I didn't do a full stop. I did what's called a rolling stop. And according to the rules of the driving test, that means that you don't know how to drive, that breaks the rules. And I was frustrated because I failed my driving test, but I was confident in my driving. And so, and you've probably seen drivers on the road that you go, wow, did they really pass their driving test? So maybe a driving test is not a very valid way to assess your driving. Its construct validity is not that great. That being said, the questions on the driving test were designed to test your driving. Maybe they're designed to check whether you follow the laws, but not necessarily drive very well. So in that case, it would be more valid, it would have more construct validity if the driving test was a test of your ability to know the rules instead of your ability to exercise the rules. Next up, for test-retest reliability, you can imagine that let's say a bunch of different people go to take their driving test, and they take their driving test with different testers. And so a different type of reliability, not only would taking the driving test multiple times or with different people assess test-retest reliability, because the same test presumably is being administered to different people, but another issue in test-retest reliability is inter-rater reliability. Does the test give you different results based off of who administered the test? So there's an episode of Drake and Josh, I don't know if you're familiar with that show, where the two boys are taking a driving test. And Josh is taking his test with this older lady that's kind of cranky, and Drake is taking his test with this younger lady that's kind of flirty. And so they take their tests and they get different results. And so the older lady is cranky the whole time, but she accurately measured whether Josh knew how to drive, because he was afraid that she would not be a very reliable tester because she hated him personally. Like, I think he liked Oprah and she hated Oprah or something like that. And so he thought she wasn't going to be very reliable, but she gave him a fair test, a reliable test, so he passed. This younger flirty lady seemed like she was not going to be reliable too. She was really friendly with Drake. They went and got fast food. They were laughing and talking. So Drake felt like no matter what, he was going to pass. But when the test was over, he failed. And it turns out that this rater was also reliable because even though she liked him, she administered the test in a fair way and gave him the result that he should have gotten. And so it's important to know that even though the results were different, we do have good inter-rater reliability, because the idea would be that regardless of which one was being tested by which one, they would get the same result. So if this lady tested him, she would give him a pass, and if she tested him, she would give him a fail, and if this lady tested him, he would get a fail, and if this lady tested him, he would get a pass. And so because the two different raters gave the same results, they're consistent. We can say that they are reliable. They have inter-rater reliability. Another way you could talk about this is to say, well, they were both administering the same test, and so the same test gave the same results, might give the same results for the two. I don't know, we'd have to test them again. But if it did give you the same results, then we could say that we also have test-retest reliability. Finally, external validity. So this is what we were talking about when we were asking, did the driving test actually make sense in the real world? think that one is pretty self-explanatory. Okay, hopefully this makes sense to you, and in the